Today I'm going to be talking to you about two case studies of implementing a sleep health program in different industries. And the first case study I'll take you through is in a series of fire departments across the US. And this study was conducted by researchers at the Division of Sleep Medicine at Harvard Medical School. So the sleep health program itself involved a 30-minute training session, which included videos from firefighters giving testimonials and management encouraging participation. The study included 8 fire departments, which then involved over 6,000 firefighters. And each of these fire departments were assigned to a different style of implementation for the training. So one of them was expert-led, and so these were sites where the experts from the research team would come to the station and deliver the training in person. Or there was train the trainer, where one of the research staff would train one of the firefighters or management on site who would then deliver the training to other employees. Or there was an online method of training where the training was just a video that was available to the firefighters to watch whenever they were free. And so it's important to realize here that the type of method that was assigned to different stations was not random. So they were already assessing which of these methods would work best given the resources and the size of the different locations. So the study then assessed the knowledge of the firefighters with regard to sleep health by giving them a survey both before and then after their training. So they wanted to get a baseline and then assess if knowledge had improved with the intervention. Each training session was then followed by a voluntary sleep disorders screening program. So this involved a series of validated questionnaires that were used to screen for common sleep disorders such as obstructive sleep apnea, insomnia, and restless leg syndrome. And then finally, about a year later, the research team followed up with surveys and focus groups to evaluate whether there was any behavior change and whether there was retention of the knowledge that the firefighters had learned about sleep health and what the general attitudes towards the program were. Okay, so let's talk about the results. So you can see that the participation rate was lower in the online group, where it was relatively high at about over 80% in the expert-led and train-the-trainer group. And if we look at how much the knowledge improved, you can see that the expert-led group had a greater increase in knowledge retention after the intervention, whereas a little bit lower in the other groups, but there was at least some improvement in knowledge for all groups. And then this graph in the bottom right is showing how many participants sought clinical sleep evaluation after their sleep disorders screening. So you can see that the expert-led group had higher rates of following up on seeing a sleep clinician after their screening. And this may have been due to having an expert in the room that they could talk to about their sleep health or be able to use them as a resource as to how to follow up with this clinician. So with regard to changes induced by the training, we can see that roughly 40% of the participants changed their sleep behavior and that this made them feel less sleepy at work and that they got more sleep at home and felt like their general life had improved. And one of the participants quoted saying that knowing now that it is much more important, sleep is precious to me. So when they were asked about what types of behaviors they changed, they said that they tried to get more sleep, that they were more aware of their own fatigue levels, and that they were changing the way that they used caffeine so that they could use it more effectively. So in one station, the firefighters would only use half caffeine per coffee in order to use it more strategically. And this is something that they learned in the training. So from the focus group discussions at the end of the study, getting feedback from participants and just general observations of the research staff, the following elements of the sleep health program were identified as keys to success. And so it's really important that you make sure to have effective communication right from the start of trying to implement something like a sleep health program. And this is even before you roll it out. So engaging employees at developmental stages and so this could be sending emails, but it's also important to sort of have those in-person communications, sort of safety group meetings or something like that. Again, right from the start, it's really important to involve unions and get management support for a program. So keeping them in early discussions and then demonstrating to the workers that this program has support from unions and management. And this can be done by featuring them in the training video. So it's really important for the success of a program to identify a local champion. So someone not in management, but maybe a intermediary supervisory role who is respected by their peers and can help to inform people about why the study is happening. And they might be the main contact person, or they can give people the contact of one of the research staff if people have further questions about the study. And finally, it's really important to ensure the confidentiality and non-punitive nature of any study. So you want people to be responding honestly and not have any fear of ulterior motives from the management for collecting certain data about them. And so all of these things all relate to trust, which is essential for both ways between management and employees. It's also important that the training is evidence-based and the information that you're providing is correct. So I strongly recommend consulting experts from either a university or a research consultancy to make sure that the information is correct. Because if you are delivering misinformation, then this could be worse than giving no information at all. And make sure you're choosing an implementation style that best fits your organization. So even though some of the results we showed today showed that the expert-led groups fared better on some of the outcome measures, this doesn't mean that it will work best for your organization. So there are a lot of pros and cons to all of those different implementation styles. So see which one fits best for you. And then tailoring the training that you deliver to your company or to your workers is really important. So making sure that the examples you use are relevant to them. And then finally, it's important to not only take a baseline measure before you put in an implementation, but then also follow up so that you can measure the success of the program or identify any problems or barriers. And then it's important to communicate these findings back to your employees who were involved in the study, because otherwise you might get less engagement in future surveys or different health promotion. Okay, so switching gears slightly to a sleep health program in aviation. So in this study, researchers not only implemented training, but they also changed a schedule. And this was performed by researchers across a domestic airline that included about 1,000 pilots. So for this study, they gave all pilots a 17-minute introductory video and again involved management and actual pilots in delivering this material to show that there was buy-in from these groups. They also gave a background survey, so that pre and post quiz for their pilots, and it was a pretty low response rate online quiz. But what it did show was that there was not a very good knowledge of sleep health that existed prior to the training. So this study also included a subgroup of 29 pilots that went into a more comprehensive training program, which involved 3.5 hours of training on a CD and then a change to one of their schedules. And during this change in schedules and training, their sleep, performance, and alertness strategies were assessed. So when we talk about the schedule that was changed in this long-haul airline, we're talking about a trip that was changed. A trip involves the outbound flight, any layover time, and then the return flight. And so they were assessing their sleep and performance both before, during, and after this trip. So in the top graph here, you can see the total sleep time for pilots that underwent the intervention in orange. And you can see clearly that they got a lot more sleep on their trip. So this was on the days that were involved in flying. And you can see that their sleep is a lot more stable from baseline to trip to recovery. Whereas when on the standard schedule and with no training, they had a lack of sleep during their critical flight days and then had to recover this sleep afterwards. And then when we look at performance, so this is looking at their reaction time speed, you can see again that the intervention led to greater performance during their trip, and that this was sustained across the study as well. So it seems like it was a pretty successful implementation. In addition, when they looked at the pre-post training quiz scores, The knowledge of sleep health increased sort of from a C grade average to an A+. There were no reported changes in the use of their alertness strategies. So if we think about the firefighters said that they changed their coffee use, but there wasn't any changes reported from this study. And it's important to realize that the impact of this intervention, while successful, we can't determine the relative contribution of the training versus the schedule change itself, because they were delivered at the same time. Also in this study, they also had a sleep health screening at the end of the training as well, but they weren't able to follow up as to how many people sought a clinician appointment afterwards due to medical privacy laws. So this is something to consider if you are looking to take these sort of measures. You need to be aware of your local laws. And it's also important to realize that changing schedules can be really hard to do, very logistically challenging. So often it is useful to model the changes that you would do first, and there are several biomathematical models that you can use to try to predict the amount of sleep and alertness that will result from changing schedules. And finally, just remembering the keys to success that were outlined in the previous case study.